All right, Damizza, how's it going? Glad to have you on Capone News.
It's an honor to be here, sir. Congratulations, man. I see you everywhere.
Oh, thank you.
Dope.
Thank you. Yeah, man. We've been working, man. So before we get into everything, man, what are you currently working on?
I'm just out having fun. I'm just living in the moment, watching a lot of the young talent and mentoring a lot. I do a lot of just, popping around and just seeing what people are doing in studios and hearing some of the new music that's coming out and just enjoying it, man.
Okay, so you're not working in radio or doing anything musically right now, just mentoring.
Well, I mean, I'm working on a project right now with Day One. We did records with K-Boy, Young Gritty, Skippy Bams, Timbaland, Eric Bellinger, Battle Cat, DJ Quick. Just took like a month to sit in the studio and just make some records. And a lot of really cool people dropped in and laid verses and did parts. So it's been a lot of fun just being back in the studio and just getting reacclimated, because after being gone for so long, so much has changed. And I'm trying to learn how the landscape has changed, what's happening in social media, how are records promoted, how are artists doing clips, what is the programs they're using, is it Pro Tools, are they using tape, are they using keyboards, are they using VSTs, just, all the different stuff that's out there right now, and just trying to get reacclimated to what everybody's doing.
That's what's up. Okay, so you're producing more now.
But more of an executive producer role now. I like, my biggest claim to fame is putting people together, is bringing people together. So I always love to play that role more than any other role. So bringing people in and introducing some of the young cats to some of the legacy artists and stuff like that. I mean, the other night we had drummer and DJ Quick, and a bunch of other people, Rick Rock and Battle Cat, and all in the same room making great records. And it's just been a lot of fun.
That's what's up. I don't really hear too much from the older guys that much anymore.
Well, that's something I want to change. I want to get them involved with some of the younger cats. A lot of the legacy artists just don't have a bridge or a connect to some of the younger cats that are making great records. You look at Drummer, you look at Rowdy Rax, you look at a lot of the, Peso and a lot of those, like with Peso, with Kendrick, but, how cool would that be to hear some of those acts like with a DJ Quick beat? You know what I mean? Or teaching them about the SSL board and some of the sound stuff and evolving some of the sound. Because a lot of people are making records in their rooms or in their basements or on their computers. And, like I was talking to Zace the other day and having him in the room with DJ Quick and saying, this is how these records are mixed or were mixed. Where can you guys find the happy medium to make something together? It's just been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that's what's up, man. We definitely don't get enough older guys out now, for sure.
Well, and it's possible. You know what I mean? Like
it's harder,
but it's possible.
It's possible.
And I've always been, my role in this hip hop thing has always been bridging gaps. The Snoop and Dre thing, any of those kind of things has always been Jay-Z and Eminem. Has always been bringing people together. And saying, wouldn't this be cool if this happened? Do you know what I mean? And then helping to foster that growth.
For sure. Well, let's start with your journey, man. How did you get introduced to radio?
I was 12 years old, and my grandma got me a boombox for Christmas. And I flipped the switch, and the radio came on, and then they gave out the phone number. So I just started calling that number and requesting songs, and then they had me come in to be an intern, and I went through all of the processes, washing the station vans and filing CDs and being a street team guy and working like that. And then just one thing led to another. I became the night jock, then I was a DJ on Saturday nights mixing, and then I was a club DJ. I did every kind of job you could. And then became the program director at a rock station when I was like 17, and I broke a bunch of rock records, and I used it as the gateway to get into what I love, and that's hip hop. And Power 106 needed a music director, and I happened to hear about it and I applied and I got it.
So how did you get the job of music director? It seems like, I mean, did you have like the experience from the other radio station?
Yeah.
Like, is that
How it happened was the music director at the time was this guy called Bruce St. James, and I had just broken this group called Garbage, which was like a platinum band. They were just about to go out with the Smashing Pumpkins, and they had done a bunch of huge records, and I got them because I invested them early and I broke the record. They did this really small 200-seat club in Santa Barbara for me. So the industry was like, how did this 17-year-old program director get this platinum band in this little club? I mean, it sold out in less than a minute, and it caused kind of a buzz. So the music director from Power came to that, and then he said, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to work at Power. And he said, well, we only have one position open. It's a Sunday night board op. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take it. And they're like, well, you're going to be the program director of radio station in Santa Barbara, the #1 radio station in your area, but you're going to come and be the lowest on the totem pole at Power 106 and just press buttons for someone else. You're going to drive all the way from Santa Barbara to LA to just press buttons. I said, I'll sweep the floors. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I just want to get my foot in the door. So the first night that I was working, it was a Sunday night from 7 to 12, and Curtis Blow was the person I was pressing buttons for. So I was learning, and Curtis told me, he said, look, if you don't f up, I'll tell you a story of hip hop at the end of every show. So every night I was learning East Coast hip hop and the origins of hip hop, from Sedgwick and Melly Mel and the Furious to, Dougie Fresh and Dana Dane and the Get Fresh crew, and all of the history of hip hop from Curtis Blow. I mean, the Henry Ford, the Model T of hip hop. Run DMC was the son of Curtis Blow. You know what I mean? Like, he was the first rapper to go platinum. So to learn from him on that level was a blessing. And then when he left, Ice-T came in. So I was learning hip hop from the West Coast gangster that started it all. You know what I mean? So I learned that, and then, I started taking these little gigs at Power. Like, when I did really good on Sunday nights, they said, well, the Saturday night's open. So I'd come in on Saturday night, drive back to Santa Barbara, and come back Sunday. And then they opened up like Power Tools with Richard Humpty Vision needed a board up. So I'd work from 7 to midnight with the Crazy Kids, go watch a movie, come back, board up for Power Tools, go back to Santa Barbara, come back and do Sunday nights. And then they said, well, since you're on the air in Santa Barbara, why don't you stay after Power Tools and work for 2 hours on the air? So then I'd come in on Saturday night, do the 7 to midnight, go watch a movie, come back, be a board op, then be on the air for 2 hours, then go back, then come back. So they just saw that I had this work ethic, and I also had the experience of being a program director. So when the music director gig opened up, the guy who was leaving said, hey, I went to the show in Santa Barbara, I saw this kid do this crazy stuff promotionally, he's attached to all of this stuff going on, why don't you bring him in? And the record companies loved me, I worked well with everybody, so, here I was 20 years old, and they said, come on in, and they made me the music director.
Damn, okay, that's pretty...
And you have to remember, I was 20 years old and hip hop was new. So they didn't know a lot of people that knew not only the history of hip hop, but was in the streets like that knew people. Do you know what I'm saying?
Was Power 106 primarily hip hop when you started working there, or what happened?
Well, it was kind of all over the place. I mean, we would play Artie the One Man Party, then we would play Boyz II Men, then we'd play Mobb Deep, then we'd play Positive K, and then we'd play, it was just all over the place. So my idea musically, direction-wise for Power was we needed to go West Coast gangster rap, because that was the most popular thing in the streets of Los Angeles. And that's what people talked about. People still bumped Ain't No Fun. People still bumped Nothing But a G Thing. People still bump, Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. So I was like, what better way for us to gain street credibility and endear us to our audience than to play Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre? So they told me that I was crazy, that, you can't play at the time, you would never hear Ain't No Fun on the radio. They would just say it's too explicit. There's no way to make a radio edit of that. So I've always prided myself on having the numbers or the receipts to back up what I say. You know what I mean? Because especially in radio and stuff like that, you know, it's a numbers game. So if you're going to take a chance like that, you got to have the numbers to back it up. So we have research projects like, you know, if McDonald's is going to roll out a new hamburger, they test it with their what's called their core audience first. So I went into the research and would put like our weekly call out, which is our weekly testing to see which records we're going to play 70 times, which records we're going to play 40 times, which record we're going to play what. And I put like Ain't No Fun in the weekly call out, and it tested better than our most popular records. So that's how I started to get the leverage to be able to do some of these crazy things. And then I just started branding out and saying Power was open to playing West Coast rap, and people like Mac 10 after Who Bangin' brought me Backyard Boogie on a cassette. Well, I took it off the cassette and played it on the air. You know what I mean? And I just got a name for being this rogue hip hop fan that'd just play anything that's dope. So we did that, and then I said, I want to get Dre and Snoop back together, and they were just like, yeah, right, you know, that'll never work in LA, someone will get shot.
Why weren't Snoop and Dre, like, I know that Dre left Death Row, but, like, what, like, I didn't actually know that they actually had issues.
Well, I don't think they had issues. I think that when Death Row disbanded, when Dre originally left, he was at the top of the game. I mean, he had just done Tupac, All Eyes on Me, California Love. He had just done, you know, The Chronic and all of this kind of stuff, but he wasn't happy. So he said he wanted to leave, and Tupac reacted to that as, you know, he was dissing him. He was saying, you know, he was out there dissing Dre. So it's not that anyone on Death Row didn't like Dre, it's just Death Row was kind of beefing with the Dre brand at the time. It wasn't even personal. So Snoop probably felt like, well, I'm on Death Row, so I've got to be loyal to Death Row, and I've lost contact with it. And because he had just left Death Row, he wasn't going to produce stuff on Death Row. Do you know what I'm saying? And Snoop was on Death Row. So they just didn't talk. And when I first met Snoop, I hired him to do weekends at Power, and he was like,
How did you meet him?
Well, I met him at we were at a concert actually. I had booked a Power, like what was called a Flavor Jam at the Palace in Hollywood, and I had booked the Dogg Pound, and the Dogg Pound was headlining, and Notorious B.I.G., Diddy, and Mace showed up. And I had Snoop and Biggie on stage together in Los Angeles. Now, this is right after Pac died. This is right before Biggie passed. So it caused a big buzz, you know what I mean, of seeing all of these guys in the same room. And I'm like, look, well, if Snoop can be on stage with Biggie, then why wouldn't he be on stage with Dre? You know what I mean? So it put the seed in my head. And then when I ran into Snoop, I was like, hey, and he was in this Georgetown outfit. And he said, I asked him how he was doing. And he was like, I'm not doing good. I just got off of Death Row. He goes, they just cut off my stipend. I was making like $5,000 a month. You know, I'm just not on the label anymore. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I'm like, well, come work at Power. And he's like a job? And I said, $50 an hour, at least you put food on the table. And he was like, oh, hell yeah, I'll do that. I was like, you could play your new music 2 hours a weekend, you know, whatever. And he started on the air. He started playing the records. Next thing you know, Master P hears him on the radio, hears the new music, hits him up. The next thing you know, he's making records with Master P. I meet Dre. I say, Dre, I heard Snoop wants to work with you again. Totally lied to him.
So Snoop was working as a DJ.
Yeah.
Master P signs him.
Yep.
Snoop comes in one day and tells you he signed.
Yeah, well, I walked in, it was a Saturday, because I would come in every Saturday to see how he's doing, and Jeff Garcia, who works with Cruz now, was the producer. And I said to, the week before, he was just playing music and everything was the same old. Then the next week I come in, he's just got all new jewelry on. Got a new Rolex, got a bunch of iced out chains and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, damn, dog, like, what happened? He goes, I just did a deal with Master P. He heard me on the radio, heard the music, and, you know, I signed a deal. And that was that.
Okay, and now, how do you meet Dr. Dre?
He was doing a song called Zoom Zoom with LL Cool J. They had just done, they were doing a video for it, and a friend of mine from Interscope hit me up and said, come meet Dre. So when I walked up to him, I said, well, what the is this? And he's like, what? And I'm like, this with LL Cool J. What happened to the one that was leaked to the Compton swap meet and the Slauson swap meet with Snoop Dogg on it? That was a way better version. And he's like, how the do you know that record? I said, dude, I'm a fan. And it just blew him away that I knew this underground bootleg copy. And he was just like, yo, I with you. Here's my number. And we just became friends. And, you know, at the time, you know, Dre had done the Firm album and the Aftermath album. I mean, people, and had Tupac out there talking with Dre like that. People weren't looking for Dre like that. And I was just like, this is a perfect opportunity, because once you've been hot, once you are, I mean, he's Dr. Dre, NWA, DOC, you know, Eazy-E, all of these great records. I'm like, dude, all he needs is a new coat of paint. You put him back with Snoop Dogg, and if we can do it under the banner of Power 106, we win, you know? So I booked a show with Snoop Dogg, and I booked Eminem at the time. Dre called me up one day and said, come to the house. I come to the house, and he's like, how do I break the white boy? And I'm like, you signed the white boy? And he said, yeah. And Eminem was in the booth doing the Slim Shady You a Bass Head. He was doing the parts for Dre.
So this was like their first session.
Yeah.
He called you.
Yeah. It brought me, while they're recording Hi My Name Is. And I said, look, you tell me the story of NWA from beginning to end, and I'll break the white boy for you. And
Dude, so now, what'd you think of Eminem when you first heard him?
oh, I knew it was going to work. Because here's Dr. Dre, NWA, the Police, all of this stuff, and here's a younger white version of him saying the same thing. You know what I mean? Like that cutting edge authority, all of that. And it was just, I mean, it was just too good. You know, the rebellious and that cosign, especially after Vanilla Ice and going against the grain. I mean, it was just too perfect.
Was there anything he told you about NWA that really surprised you?
Not really, except for like the process. Like, you know, how hard it was to get a performance out of Eazy-E, rest in peace. Or, you know, it was so long ago that I don't really remember the exact details, but from the world-class Wrecking Crew all the way forward, you know, so I mean, as much as you could. You didn't go home and
take notes?
No, I wish you know, that's one thing I really wish I did in all of the places, because, you know, I was so young and everything was happening so fast that it was surreal to me. I just met Dr. Dre. I was in shock. I couldn't remember when I got home. I could barely remember going, you know what I mean? Because you kind of shut down in those situations. You know, when you're in, for instance, being the music director at Power, I was meeting all of my idols. So when they would come in, I would have to shut off the fan and do the business. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, say for instance, you're a real estate person or a loan officer, and your favorite artist comes in. When it's time to do the paperwork, all that other stuff got to go away, or else you're going to paperwork. You know what I mean? So I always had to do stuff that was right, not only for the radio station, but right for their brand, and then I could be a fan. But putting Dre and Snoop together was because I was a fan. I wanted to see the show. You know, a funny thing is when I got them together and we did the first show in Hawaii, which ended up being the Up in Smoke tour.
Right? How'd you get them together?
Well, so after Eminem, I booked Eminem on the same show as Snoop Dogg, which was the first Powerhouse. And I said, Dre, why don't you come to the show? You could do Guilty Conscience with Eminem and see Snoop again. And that's when I could get them in the room together. So I put a dressing room next to Snoop Dogg's dressing room for Dr. Dre. And when Snoop went in his dressing room, I switched the names on the door so that Dr. Dre would walk into Snoop Dogg's dressing room and think that it was his.
Okay. And this worked good.
It worked great. Dre walked in and everybody was like, Dre! So DJ Jam, and I cannot say...
And you did the same thing to get him to talk again.
Straight up. Yeah. But this was the first time they were in the room together.
Okay.
And the first conversation. That's how we got it together. So Dre and I were watching Snoop Dogg perform, and I asked DJ Jam, I'm like, yo, play Deep Cover. And they were both just like, it's too early, you know, they just started talking. And I'm like, Dre, please. And he's like, dog, relax. And so I just went and grabbed 2 microphones, held them in front of Dre. I said, do this. That's what that crowd wants. And he's like, all right. He grabbed both mics, walked out and went, what up, Snoop? And they hit Deep Cover and the place just went nuts. And I was like, we need to do a show, but we could not do it in LA. You know, LA with, you know, Biggie just passing, Pac just passing. I mean, Death Row, Suge. I mean, it was a hot time. So we could not do a show in LA. So we said, let's take it to Hawaii. And then we did a show in a hotel ballroom called Chronic Island, which became the Up and Smoke Tour.
Okay, now, I've interviewed Eminem's former bodyguard, and also interviewed Reggie Wright, the head of security at Death Row.
I know Reggie.
Death Row went to Hawaii looking for Snoop and everybody. Okay,
So did the Booyah Tribe.
So did the Booyah Tribe. Okay, I didn't know that.
Well, what happened? The first thing that happened is I got a call from Paul Rosenberg that said the Booyah Tribe was on the plane spitting on Eminem, and they were coming into the gate, and did we have security? So I sent the Hawaii Police Department to come get M off the plane.
Why did the Booyah, okay, so why was the Booyah Tribe mad at Eminem?
I think they were there on behalf of Suge.
Oh, okay.
But how I met the Booyah Tribe, who are dear friends to this day, is Snoop came out and he's like, the Booyah Tribe is downstairs. We fitting to go down there. I was like, no, let me handle this. And he goes, little white boy handle the Booyah Tribe? Yeah, right. And so they were at the bottom of the escalator, and I came down the escalator, and I just remember seeing all of these Samoan guys, not one of them under 300 pounds, 400 pounds. And I came down and I almost bumped into Giant, who's one of my best buddies to this day. I said, back up, little man, you know, just like joking around. And they were like, oh, we've heard of you. You're Damien. And I said, yeah. And they're like, I was like, why don't you guys come in and be my guest? If you guys ever need records played, I'm going to be the guy to play it. So come on in and enjoy the show and be my guest. And they said, you show us respect, we'll show you respect. So they came in and watched the show, and then Snoop came out and said, yo, where's the Booyah Tribe? And I said, in the audience. And he goes, what? And I said, you see that group of police surrounding the Booyah Tribe in the back? And he's like, oh, I get it. Now you know where they're at, and they're guarded by police. I said, they're stars. They deserve that respect. Now the audience won't f with them.
Okay, now what about Death?
And we've been friends to this day.
Yeah, that's a pretty slick move, for sure. Now what about Death Row, though?
What about it? Reggie, I knew Reggie. I knew Cedric. I knew...
Reggie, I don't think
No,
Reggie
I
was
mean,
there.
I just knew all of them.
Okay.
You know, from previous... You know,
because they were with Eminem on the plane ride home.
Oh, I didn't hear about the plane ride home, but while M was in my custody, everything was fine. We didn't have no problems.
Okay. Now, I also heard Eminem was cool with the Booyah Tribe. So
Later
on, they became cool, right?
They did a record together.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Be Real, the Battle Cat.
Okay.
I broke the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
You know, as time evolved, everybody got to know each other. At the time, hip hop was so small. So people's personal issues got smaller and smaller. And especially when you had somebody like me running around between camps saying, everybody got along in that era. And we would have these powerhouses where I would have Jay-Z, Eminem, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Master P. Once a year, everybody would put their bullshit aside and come and party with us. So we never had an issue. We never had a fight. We never had a shooting. You know, Suge, for instance, the first time I met Suge, I heard he was getting out of jail. And I said, well, why doesn't the Anaheim Police Department showed up at my office and said, we're shutting down Powerhouse. And I said, why? And he goes, because Suge Knight just got out of jail and we heard he's coming to Powerhouse. And I was like, but why doesn't somebody invite him? What I learned with the Booyah Tribe in Hawaii, why doesn't somebody invite him? At least we'll know where he's at. And they said, great, do that. So I called up Death Row and I asked for Suge. They put me on the phone with Suge and I invited him. And he just said, yo, you showed me respect, I'll show you respect. You're not gonna have a problem with me. And he came and he watched the show. That's where I met Reggie in person, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Came to the Powerhouse. And it tripped me out because when Reggie was walking, I saw a police badge on him and I was like, what the heck, you're a cop? And he said, Compton PD.
Oh, okay. So he was, okay.
That's when I knew how much reach Death Row had. And what's funny about it is the next morning was a Sunday and I was asleep and there was a knock at my door. And I was like, who the hell is hitting me Sunday morning? You know, I'm not answering that. And then they hit harder. I was like, I went downstairs, I opened the door and there was a basket at the door. And it said, with my compliments, Suge Knight. I'm like, how this fool get my address? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, Suge Knight had a habit of doing that, from what I understand.
But Suge and I always got along. You know, Suge was always, you know, I invited him to a mixer meeting. He'd call me and ask me about records. I played the Cisco Crooked Eye record, you know. So, I mean, we always had a mutual respect. He was always real cool with me. You know, the way that I always looked at Suge was if he smelled weakness on you or he smelled any bullshit, if you lied to him, anything like that, he would prey upon that. But if you were just straight with him and just dealt with him straight up, he'd deal with you straight up. And we always had a great relationship. But at Powerhouse, it was kind of interesting because C Murder came up to me and he said, hey, I heard Suge's here, I want to meet him. And I walked him upstairs to meet Suge, and Suge grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him and started doing this in his ear. And I was like, oh shit, like what the f- going on? And I was like, Suge, like what are you doing? Like, you know, this. And he goes, he sampled Tupac and didn't clear it. So we had something we needed to work out. But I told you, you will not have a problem with me here.
Okay, now I know what this is. I talked to Reggie about this before in one of our old interviews. He didn't just sample it. He like rapped Tupac word for word.
I don't know, but I saw the confrontation. It was right in front of me. And Irv Gotti and Ja Rule were standing right there when it happened too.
And it was pretty ugly.
It wasn't ugly, it was intense.
Okay.
He grabbed him and he just set it in his ear, and I saw the other Suge. The eyes rolled back in his head and he was just, ah. But I looked at him, I said, Suge, like, you know, little white boy talking shit to Suge Knight. You know what I mean? I was just like, don't make me get in a fight with you here, you know, all of this kind of shit. And he was just like, Dame, I told you, you will not have a problem with me here. It's just he sampled Tupac. He didn't clear it. We had to talk. But you will not have a problem with me here.
Now, Snoop was with No Limit at the time that this happened?
Yeah, I think that's why he was there. But that's also to tell you, Suge was respectful. He watched Snoop, he watched Nate, he watched everybody perform, Daz, Corrupt, and he just watched the show, went home. Didn't cause no problems whatsoever.
Which is kind of crazy because we know that they had some issues going on.
But that just shows you a little diplomacy goes a long way. You know what I mean? And he was just cool about it. He just said, look, thank you for inviting me. No one's invited me to things before. And if I want to get my records played, he knew he couldn't.
Did you work with Suge after that? Did you
play any of his records? When he released the Crooked Eye record, you know, he wanted to come and play it for the mixers. I'm like, dude, if we tell the mixers that you're coming, they're not going to show up. So why don't you just be at the radio station 5 o'clock this day and I'll walk you in. And it was funny because my boss was sitting there and I brought Suge into his office and sat him down and said, can you guys just talk for a minute while I go see if the mixers are ready? And my boss looked over at me like Midwest white dude, like looked at me like, you're gonna leave me in a room with Suge Knight? Like, and Suge was smoking a cigar. And he looks at Suge's cigar, looks at me, looks at his cigar, looks at me, and not even thinking, I looked over at Suge, I said, Suge, you know you can't smoke a cigar in here. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Dame. And he said, give me the trash can. He put the cigar out. The second that Suge left, my boss walks up to me and goes, what are you into? Are you a gangbanger? Like, how do you have that kind of control over Suge Knight? I'm like, it's not control, it's respect. If you treat him with respect, he'll treat you with respect. Should have just said something. He's not an animal. You know what I mean? Like, And then we went down and into the mixer meeting, and I said, hey, I brought a friend. And Suge walked in, and all of the mixers got up and hit the back wall. And I'm like, he's not gonna bite you. You know what I mean? Like, and ask him some questions about Pac. Ask him about the history of Death Row, you know, and it all just kind of calmed down. The next thing you know, they were playing the record, and it did pretty well for us. And then Suge went back to jail, so.
Oh, yeah, he did. At that time, he did go back for a while.
Yeah, so that was the end of that.
Okay. Jay-Z. How did you end up working with Jay-Z?
Well, Jay-Z was friends with Jay Brown. And Jay Brown worked at Quest Records, which is Quincy Jones's company. And he had a lot of soundtracks. So he had an artist called Jay-Z who had done like, I think it was the Have Plenty soundtrack or one of those soundtracks. It was like Sunshine, Who You With, Wishing on a Star, you know, a lot of those type of records. He was pushing those and wanted to manage Jay. So he kept bringing me Jay-Z records, and I kept trying the Jay-Z records, and we played like 5 records and they didn't work, and we were about to give up. We were just like, look, Jay ain't gonna do, like, it's a wrap. And then they came out with Hard Knock Life.
So from what I understand, you were saying Jay was about to get dropped from Def Jam.
Well, his label wasn't going to get funded. You know what I mean? Like, he had a label deal with Def Jam. Okay. And he had put out like all of those records and then came with like City Is Mine. And it just didn't work. So I grabbed I Know What Girls Like off that album and played it and tried to get some response out of it. We got a little bit, but it got him to the point of being able to do Hard Knock Life.
Now, how would you know if a record was getting a good response?
The research. Like, we did a lot of, we'd ask the fans. You know, the way that research works is you take 100 people a week and you cold call them back in the day. You would call just random phone numbers out of the phone book. And when someone answered, you'd say, are you between the age of 12 and 24? Are you Hispanic? What zip code do you live in? Now, if the zip code, the age, and everything matched, which was a screener question, basically, then we'd say, okay, I'll mail you $10 or a Power 106 t-shirt if you answer some questions for me. Then I would play them a 10-second, 15-second hook of the record and say, one, do you know what that is? Can you identify it? If they could identify the name and the title of the title and the artist, then that is a 10 on the scale, 1 to 10. Yeah, well, I know the artist name, but I don't know the song. Well, that's a 5. Well, I don't know the name, but the song is familiar. Will that be a 1? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever heard the song before? You know what I mean? And you score it like that. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like that record? 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. And then you take it and you average it out over 2 weeks so that you just don't have, you know, songs jump up and down. You average it out over 2 weeks, and that's how you decide what records you're going to play.
Okay, and so he wasn't getting a good response with that album. What about his first album where,
Ain't No did great.
Ain't No.
You know, yeah. but that was years before, and this was a new deal. He hadn't had a hit on Def Jam yet. You know what I mean? We were on, second album and no big record. You know what I mean? So he did Hard Knock Life and he did Can I Get Her about the same time. And we had just broken Ja Rule, and Ja Rule had Holla Holla and How Many Wanna, and was becoming a radio artist. So that, together with DMX and Irv doing what Irv was doing, it just worked.
Okay, so he has Hard Knock Life, and that does pretty good?
Well, at first, people were saying it was a novelty record. They were like, Annie, that's corny, da-da-da-da-da, all of this kind of stuff. And Hot 97 in New York, because I was doing Power 106, Hot 97, and 32 stations in the middle. So we were the MTV of the day, basically. MTV could break you if you had a good video, but people were making records for Power 106. I mean, it was like, because we were a national radio station, basically. Our signal didn't go nationally, but we consulted nationally. So if I were to take, say, Jay-Z Hard Knock Life and say, we're going to add this week, it would be to 32 stations, plus Power and Hot. So you had two bookends, LA and New York, and then every major market in the middle, Chicago, Houston, Florida, Miami, Rhode Island, everywhere. And then the rest of the country would follow that. So if we wanted to make an artist a hit, it was pretty easy. They'd get 3,000 spins the first week if we just said, I'm playing this. But when we started playing Hard Knock Life in New York, it wasn't getting good numbers, and that was his core market. So my boss at the time, Steve Smith, said, we're going to get off this record. And I was like, wait, we're 2 weeks ahead in Los Angeles because we played it before Hot 97. So it was like, we're getting good research, that research that I told you about. We're getting good numbers in LA. Give it another week and see what happens. Well, that week it popped in New York. And then we had Jay-Z.
Okay, because I remember Hard Knock Life, the song seemed like it kind of came and went really fast.
Well, it kind of came and went, but it came and went, but it also set the stage. And it got Def Jam excited again. You know what I mean? And then there was the Can I Get a stuff too happening at the same time. So they were...
Can I Get It came out. That was crazy. That song went crazy.
Well, and that's what got him the budget. Do you see what I'm saying? To come out with the next one.
But that came out on originally on a soundtrack. I think it was it Rush Hour? I think or Money Talk.
One of those.
Something like that.
One of those. But at the same time, also keep in mind, he also did Money Ain't a Thing. So like where I met Ja Rule and Irv,
that was on Jermaine's album too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was building the buzz, and I was killing Money Ain't a Thing. So Jermaine was like a core artist for us, So when I booked Powerhouse with Jermaine at Universal Studios, Jay came and did Money Ain't a Thing, and he brought Irv Gotti and Ja Rule, and that's how that relationship started.
Okay.
And that's how we got Can I Get It, because Irv produced.
Well, he produced it, right? And Ja Rule wrote the hook.
Yep.
And then Jay, from what I just seen from interviews, Jay called Irv and was like, I gotta have this.
Yep. Yeah. But that was also instrumental in breaking Ja Rule.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard Ja Rule. So, I went to the Hard Knock Life tour.
But for us, that was the third record. We did How Many Wanna First, which was, I think, on, like I said, the Have Plenty soundtrack or something, which was Jay Brown again. Then there was Holla Holla. And then there was Can I Get It? And then there was Between Me and You.
Okay. Right. Between Me and You came, that was his next album.
Yes. And that was actually going to be a record with Brandy. Brandy was actually going to get on that record.
Oh, really? Wow. Would you know what happened?
He was banging Brandy and then they broke up.
Oh.
Whoops.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Damn, okay. Yeah. And that's Christina Milian's on that, right?
Yep.
That was her first record.
Yep. I'm actually in that video.
Right, okay.
I'm walking with the Power 106 t-shirt.
When I was doing my research, I seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, that caused a problem.
Okay. Well, what happened?
Well, the competing radio companies were like, you guys are too loyal to this guy. You guys have him in the video. But we had broken all of their records, so there's not much they could say. And I just told the label, I said, just blur out my shirt. If it's an issue of my shirt, just blur out my shirt. And they blurred it out, and everybody shut up and went about their business.
When it comes to stuff like that, I remember Tupac, at the end of To Live and Die in L.A., he shouted out the radio stations. Yeah. So, and I think I remember, Power would just edit out everybody else and everybody, everybody just kind of edited out.
Well, look at it like this. When I produced Where I Want to Be for Nate Dogg with KG from Naughty by Nature, it says Young Damian Young. Corrupt says Young Damian Young in the third verse. A lot of radio stations across the country muted that or reversed it.
That's petty.
Yeah, it's petty, but you also have to remember, I had such a lock on the industry. I was number 4 in the Source Power 30. You know what I mean? You don't get to be number 4 in the Source Power 30 unless you're doing some shit. And a lot of radio, and there was never a radio guy before, after, or since, you know, that's been in the Power 30, especially in the top 5 like that. You know, Funk Flex peaked at like what, 10? Or 10, 20 in his heyday? You know what I mean? Like,
I hear you. I hear you.
so there was some jealous
Yeah, you're in videos and shit. I can see that.
And that didn't help either. You know what I mean? Oh, he's flossing in videos, blah, 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 you know, rubbing it in everybody's face. Well, I was just having fun with my friends. You know what I mean? Like, I believed in them early. They said, come to the party. I come to the party, and I always start some drama.
Okay. Did you ever have to work with Dame Dash?
Dame Dash and I got along great. I never had a problem with Dame. It was more Jay-Z that I had issues with than Dame.
Why do you say that?
Well, it was just, Jay operates from a place of ego. He's an artist, you know, so he always has to be right. He was much more difficult to work with than Dame. But Dame is just passionate about what he does. And a lot of people don't give Dame the credit that he deserves. I mean, he did the first clothing brand deal. I mean, brought hip hop and commerce together. And that opened the door for Sean John. That opened the door for G-Unit. That opened the door to the liquor stuff. I mean, those movies that he was making around the same time as Master P and all of that stuff. I mean, Cameron, Jim Jones. I mean, there's a lot of things that Dame did that were really positive for our business, and people don't give him the credit for that. You know, and I think sometimes when Dame would get, I don't want to say excited, but when Dame would get pumped up and start to be passionate about what he believed in, people would fear that confrontation, and the more that you backed up, the more Dame would press. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Suge Knight thing. If he smelled fear on you or you were bullshitting, because a lot of times people would just bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, try to make a point to just get out of the room and tell Dame what he wants to hear, as opposed to have a discussion with him. And Dame liked a good debate, but he also will compromise. And he was always the guy that was the balance in Rockefeller. You know what I mean? Like, if I wanted something done with Rockefeller, I mean, I introduced Jay to Eminem. I did The Watcher Part 2. I did his first #1. And I would still have problems getting Jay to do something. You know what I mean? Like, we had just broken Hard Knock Life. We had done all of these great things, and it was like, I remember right after I introduced him to Eminem, I'm like, see, you know, it's not always, why is it always got to be pulling teeth with you? Look what just happened. You just met Eminem. You know what I mean? Now go make a record with him. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was still like, yeah, okay. You know what I mean? And it was just like, come on, man. You know, but Dame, I could call and be like, look, this is what I'm trying to do, and Dame would see it. And I mean, I don't think I've ever had a confrontation with Dame. You know what I mean? I know that we argued about stuff and we were passionate, both sides of us, you know, but I'm the same way. If I get worked up and I believe in what I'm talking about, then it's a two-way debate, you know, and we went at it, but in a debate, not in any confrontation. And Dame would always be, he's such a business mind that if you could prove to him in numbers what you wanted to do, then he would get it.
This is completely opposite to what we hear today.
Well, you have a lot of people that are clout chasing. They're sucking Jay's dick. You know what I mean? That just want to get cool with Jay or cool with Rock Nation or cool with all these people. And I'm well past that. You know, I helped build these brands, so I don't have the same, and I have real world experience. Like, a lot of people may have dealt with Jay-Z once or dealt with Dame once or saw him in one meeting or this. I was dealing with him every day. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a different thing with my perspective. And Jay was one artist that I was dealing with. I mean, like I said, I introduced Eminem to Jay-Z because I had just broken Eminem. I had just put Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg together. So it's not like I didn't have the track record to talk my shit. You know what I mean? So when I talk, people listen. Being number 4 in the Source Power 30, you're gonna listen. You obviously know something. Do you know what I mean? So.
Well, now, Jay-Z ends up writing for Dr. Dre.
Right.
Do you know how that happens?
Yes. Well, there was a Powerhouse that we had when Eminem was on, and I had Jay-Z on it. So, of course, we introduced him to Eminem. We also introduced him to Dr. Dre. They had a separate conversation through Steve Stout about producing a record called Malibu Dre. And this is the first record that Jay wrote for Dr. Dre. And it didn't come out right. Big John Platt actually hooked it up with Steve Stout, and it didn't come out right. So one night I'm in my office, and Dre calls me to A&M Studios, and I think it was Storch's first night, and he was just in the back playing that bling, 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 and they had just made the beat, and I was like, what's this? And he goes, this is what we're sending to Jay-Z. Is it right for the radio station? Because like I said, people were making records for Power 106. Like they'd make a video for MTV at the time. So, you know, it was dope. I mean, I got to be in the room while they were putting the beat together, and this is just the piano and the drum beat. And then they sent it off to him. Then 2 nights later, Dre calls me up and says, come to the studio, and he plays me Still DRE. And it was ridiculous. I literally took it out of the CD player in the studio and started walking out, and he said, where are you going? I said, to play it. Walked out and played it.
That fast.
That quick.
Now, I think you said that Jimmy Iovine was going to sell Dr. Dre and Eminem's contracts?
Yeah, that was the rumor. You know, I was trying to remember the exact conversation because someone had asked me about that before. And the only thing that I can remember definitively is that when we went on the air with the promotion, Jimmy called me and said, what are you doing? Why do I have a bill on my desk for $250,000 for an artist I haven't seen since Death Row and a producer who doesn't produce? And he said, after the Aftermath album and after the thing, I'm still trying to get my money back from what I spent on Aftermath. And I think that's where the conversation went to, well, I've got this option to sell the contract. And I think it was like $5 million or something. But he did tell me that if he didn't get a record out of that and we did this promotion and he spent the $250,000, he was going to sue me for it.
It ended up working out.
So he put me on the hook for Dre's promotional budget. And they weren't talking at the time. At the very beginning, when I first started with it, this is before Eminem, before any of that. It was, I mean, because we went on the air with the promotion for the Dre and Snoop reunion as Eminem was breaking and then added Eminem to it. You know, the promos, when we first went on the air with it, it wasn't with M. So when we rolled it out, then we added M to it. Because even the drops were like, you know, what about me? Y'all forgot about me. You know what I mean? And that's where we really started. We didn't even have Still DRE. I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, they hadn't made Still DRE. They did Just Dippin' for No Limit Top Dog. And they shot the video for it in Hawaii on the stage. That show, or the video for Just Dippin' on YouTube, is the Hawaii performance.
Oh, okay.
It was crazy.
Man, you were like right in the middle of like all this like crazy hip hop history.
I mean, Biggie was sitting in my office the morning before he died. I mean, I was the last person to record him. You know what I mean? Like, we were the center. Power 106 was the center of hip hop. He was at Power 106 March 8th. He died on March 9th.
How did you meet Biggie?
Through Puff.
Okay. How'd you
know,
meet?
I mean, what happened was when Biggie was getting ready to put out Ready to Die, I mean, we had already done Puffy in Paradise, or did we do Puffy in Paradise? No, we were about to do Puffy in Paradise, which is the first artist that I really broke was Puffy on Power. I mean, Can't Nobody Hold Me Down right after that is when I came in. So Mace, Puffy, Biggie, those were the first big projects that I worked on. And that's where I met Benny Medina, that's where I met Diddy, and we sold more records in LA than they did in New York first week. So when Biggie's album came out, it was while they were working on Diddy's album as well, because he did the verse for Victory. I think that was on Diddy's album, right?
Yeah.
Where he did that verse as the freestyle for the Baker Boys. That's the verse that I recorded. That's the last verse he rapped.
Why was LA the one that was breaking these records and not New York?
Probably because they had this little nut job that was running around pulling records out of camps. I mean, I was literally going to studios and pushing people to give me records. I mean, I was doing stuff like Big Pun. We broke Big Pun. You know, Steve Rifkin.
For New York.
Yeah, Steve Rifkin came in with a VHS tape with Big Pun, Still Not a Player, and I was playing it in the VHS. It got past the first 10 seconds. I took it out, walked into the production room. He goes, "Where are you taking my tape?" I walked into the production room and took it from the video cassette and put it on a CD, walked it into the studio, handed him back his videotape, and the next record that played was Big Pun. And he's like, "What the f*** are you doing? I haven't even played this for anybody in New York yet." You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of shit I was doing. So people were bringing me records. You know what I mean? Like, so we were A&Ring kind of the records. I mean, people were making the records for Power 106.
Is there any records that you passed on or that you didn't see that you regret?
Not that I regret, but I've passed on a lot. I didn't hear H to the Izzo. I didn't hear, a lot of records that I was just like, anything by Jay-Z. I thought that would be a smash. I played it every hour and it was like, mistake. Do you know what I mean? Didn't work out. You know what I mean? When Funkmaster Flex released his DMX record, I was wrong on that one. You know what I mean?
Which record was
whatever
this?
it was that Flex, when he first put that single out, I played it every hour on Power 106 and we got complaints.
Really?
So, yeah, well, I mean, no one was playing East Coast acts like that. I mean, DMX had never had a record on Power before. And because it was Funkmaster Flex, and I was like, okay, this is our chance to break DMX in Los Angeles. So I started going crazy with that, and then it didn't work, but we got Can I Get It down the line, and that worked.
Okay, so Flex was syndicated?
No, so I had Power 106. Our sister station was Hot 97.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I was helping the programming at Hot 97 at the time. So like, for instance, when Flex wouldn't sign his contract, they'd call me to go to New York to talk to Flex. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
So
DMX was hot though in New York.
Oh, he was burning in New York.
Okay, but
and that was Irv's guy.
LA wasn't.
Nah.
LA wasn't feeling
it. LA wasn't playing New York records, and New York wasn't playing LA records. Do you know what I'm saying? So.
Well, now you had Puffy, you had Jay-Z.
Well, I mean, I'm saying me coming. I mean, we played some of like Mobb Deep. There were there was the every once in a while. You know what I mean? But not like hardcore like that. And Irv used to tell me that I built the bridge. You know what I mean? Like, I brought everyone together. That was my main goal, was to get everybody to work together. So with the powerhouses and introducing everybody, and I can't tell you how many people I've introduced over my career. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, even people that are still working together today that don't realize that came from a powerhouse. You know what I mean? But think about that concept. Jay-Z came up to me at a powerhouse and said, "I want to meet Eminem." I said, "Oh, come with me," and just walked him right into his dressing room. I mean, the most guarded artist in the world, and I could literally just walk in the dressing room.
That's pretty crazy, man. That Jay-Z wanted to meet Eminem.
Well,
man. And
you have to remember, I was there from the first night with Eminem. When he was recording Hi, My Name Is. So, M was late getting to the stage. He said, "I want to leave." And I grabbed a cold cut off the table and threw it at him and hit him in the side of the face. And we had a food fight to stall out. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, stall him out a bit. You know what I mean? And luckily, when the last cold cut was thrown, me, him, and Exhibit having this food fight, we're ready. Oh, thank you, Jesus. And that's the way I looked at it. I was always the guy who was sitting there, like, stressed out, like, how the f am I going to get this guy on stage? He's trying to leave. What do I do? And I'm like 20-something years old. He's 20-something years old. We're the two young white guys in the freaking camp of hip-hop. There's nobody else. you know? So we just sit there and talk shit and get, you know what I mean? Like, we related. Do you know what I mean?
How did you introduce Eminem and Mariah?
Gang, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. Nah, M said, I want her for a movie, you know, and that was 8 Mile. So I knew that she wanted to do movies, and I knew if I didn't introduce her that I would catch hell later. And so I said, look, Eminem wants to meet you. First thing she said was no. And I said, well, he's got this movie. And she's like, what's his number? You know, but you're going to be on the phone with me. And I'm like, so called him up first and said, player, please don't, you know, I know where this is going. Christina Aguilera, Backstreet Boys, all this kind of stuff. Please don't. I'm helping to manage her. You know, I'm rebuilding her. She's gone through a lot. No, I want her to be in the movie. And then the first thing he said to her was, I want you to play my mother. And it was like, oh, here we go. You know what I mean? And then she just started chasing him at that point. So, was what it was.
Now, I guess you were on a plane ride?
Yeah, we were in New York for the Glitter premiere, or for the Glitter album. And we were meeting with some of the investors and stuff like that. And we got on the plane, and she's like, we're going to stop in Detroit. And I'm like, Detroit? For what? She goes, to meet M and read the script. And I'm like, you're going to play his mother? And she goes, no, I'm going to read the love interest. I'm like, here we go. And so the next thing I know, I'm eating McDonald's in M's kitchen with his family, his aunt and his little brother, and they disappear in the room. And I'm just like, okay, I see where this is going. I'm going home. And that was that.
Okay, now, you disappeared for a while after this. You avoided Mariah for a while.
Oh, hell yeah. Because, you know, the thing is I started realizing that she was using me. You know what I'm saying? Like, every time there would be a problem, she'd throw my name in it. Or anytime there was something going on, like, she would not make a decision without calling me. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, the Virgin $100 million deal or whatever it was falling apart at one point, the Glitter deal, because the label wanted a studio album. They didn't want a soundtrack from an independent movie with a bunch of cover records on it. You know what I mean? They wanted a Mariah Carey album. And Nancy Berry and Ken Berry, who were the head of Virgin Records at the time, just spent this $100 million. And they're like, look, I want a studio album. So they were getting ready to back out, and, you know, she said she needed the money. I know, yeah, it's crazy, right? But when you fly around in private jets and, you know, buy expensive houses and all this kind of stuff and haven't had a hit in a while and don't tour, you know, I mean, you know, it is what it is. So I get called, I go to New York, and we're in the limo and with the head of Virgin, Nancy Berry, and she's like, well, are you going to play the record? And I'm like, play the record? Like, I haven't even heard the record yet, and you're already like, well, we'll do the deal if you play the record. And I'm just like, well, hold up. How did I get in the middle of this? And then Mariah gets out of the car, and we're at the airport. We're at Teterboro. And she gets out of the car and she goes, I'm going to LA. You have until I land in Los Angeles to close that deal. And so I was in the car with her back to Mariah's apartment, me and Nancy Berry, and I closed the deal.
She relied on you for a lot.
Everything. You know what I mean? It just got, even like with the reverse rights on Baby If You Give It To Me with Busta Rhymes and all of that kind of shit. Like, call and get me this clearance. And I'm just like sitting there going like, player, that's not my gig. Well, you know Busta, and because I was playing Busta, having a radio guy call Busta or Chris Lighty, rest in peace, or management and be like, I need you to clear this record, it's like, damn, that's not fair. You have a radio guy calling me that's leverage. It's unfair leverage. You know what I mean? And I was cleaning up a lot of her messes. You know, whether it's Thank God I Found You, whether it's, you know, pushing that to top 10 and #1, whether it's the Jay-Z Heartbreaker thing, whether it's the $100 million deal, whether it was a cleanup of Glitter. I mean, I did half the Glitter album. You know what I mean? Like, when she couldn't finish it. So that's just what I did. And I kept telling her, don't do this shit. Then there's less to clean up. But she kept doing it and then coming to me to clean it up. So I digress.
How did you guys meet? How did you end up managing her?
Well, when she was at her peak, she got a deal with Sony for her own label. It was called Crave. And she had a group called Allure, which had a song called Head Over Heels. And Nas was rapping on it. She actually wrote the record. She did a lot of the vocals. It was just another thing for her to do, side project. She's an amazing writer and she's an amazing producer and she has a great ear. So she made this record and she had some friends sing it or be the group and she put it out. Well, they came to radio to play this record. And it was one of the first records that I played on Power. It was a great record. And it had Nas on it. So I'm like, oh, this is great. Played the record. She called the radio station to say thank you. And I happened to be there. So she was like, you're the guy who played Head Over Heels. Thank you. And I'm like, well, I said, that's great and everything. But, you know, I was listening to your album. We got it today. What's this Shook One's Mobb Deep sample on this song on this new Butterfly album? And she goes, you heard that already? I said, yeah. And she goes, that was my idea. I said, well, I thought Trackmasters would have. How'd you know Trackmasters produced it? You know what I mean? It's the same thing like with Dr. Dre. I research everything. You know who I'm talking to before I talk to him. You know what I mean? Like I'm a radio guy. I'm a research guy. You know, I like to know the whole lay of the land before I get myself involved in some shit. You know what I mean? So she called to say thank you. I happened to answer the phone. We hit it off. You know, she's a little bit older than I am, but she grew up on WBLS and she loves radio and we just hit it off. So we just became friends. And then I went to New York, and while I was in New York, I was having dinner with her and Tracy Waples, who was Peter Guns and Lloyd Tariq's A&R person, and also worked with Shine. And we're sitting there having dinner and the phone rings and it's Steve Stout and Tommy Mottola. So I go they're like, come next door. I'm like, well, how do you know where I'm at right now? And they're like, well, are you having dinner with Mariah? I'm like, so I saw the damsel in distress thing and fell for it. Do you know what I mean? But then as time went on, I started to realize like, okay, Derek Jeter, Luis Miguel, Eminem, oh, I'm the next one. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then as things kind of progressed, I just kind of went, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, this isn't working.
Well, she was supposed to do the song with Ja Rule, not J-Lo?
We did it. I produced the song If We with Ja Rule for the Glitter soundtrack. It was the only new song on the entire album. Tommy Mottola heard that Ja Rule and Mariah did a record together. Somehow he got the record and said, I want you to do the same thing back and forth, but with J-Lo, and gave him $250,000 to do it. And
what did Tommy Mottola say to you?
So I hear you know my ex-wife. Yeah? You her?
Just like that?
Exactly like that. And I was like, dude, just like we're having a conversation, I'm not going to go back to her and tell her what we talked about. The same way I'm not going to tell you what we talked about. And then he tried to be a little bit old mafia style, dim lit Italian restaurant, be a little bit intimidating. And I just looked at him and I said, bro, if you're not wearing red or blue, I'm not worried about you. And that was that.
But he's something, he's important. He's so.
Well, he said I could make you a lot of money. And he put his phone number on the back of a card, slid it across the table. I said, you want me to keep tabs on your ex-wife? Is that what you're saying? And he was like, well, I could make you a lot of money. And I'm like, bro, I'm not with this trick shit. I left.
That's some weirdo shit.
Weirdo shit. I'm like, some John shit. I'm just like, I'm good. And they're like, we have some shit we want to show you. So then they took me to a studio, introduced me to J-Lo, who was making techno records. I'm like, this. Then they take me to another studio and introduce me to Nas. Now that I could with. And what's funny is Nas was working on that, that song where he says sadomasochistic or something, and I think it's Illmatic or one of those records. Where he's like, yeah, hey, Miz, when they want to tie up bitches and do all that kind of shit, what is that called? And I said, sadomasochistic. It's like, cool. So I wrote a Nas line.
Oh shit.
No, I'm just kidding.
That's what's up.
No, but that's the kind of shit is I was getting pulled in a lot of directions. Like, because I had that power where I could play records and break artists and do all of that kind of stuff, it was always like, oh, you know, we need him here, we need him there. But then after a while, that shit just got tired. You know what I mean? And then he really got pissed when I put Jay-Z on the record.
With Mariah?
Yeah.
Why?
She had a hit, and he just spent all this time trying to destroy her.
Okay, so she was blackballed by him.
Oh, they were trying. It was her last record on Sony. Rainbow was the last album on Sony. And she was about to get off Sony. He's the former CEO and her ex-husband. Or the CEO and her ex-husband. Now, you got to look at it like this, and I didn't really think of it at the time, or I probably would have handled it different. But you have this 18-year-old singer. You're, 50 years old, record executive. She comes along. You know what I mean? Like... And then when she blew up, she dumped him. So, I mean, I could see how he would be a little bit whatever, but not like that. You know what I mean? Like, if it's over, let it go. But it is what it is.
Damn, that's okay.
But I wasn't trying to get in the middle of their domestic shit. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I'm cool.
What was your overall experience with Mariah? You know, you hear a lot of crazy things like, you know, don't look her in the eyes if she's around. And
never saw none of that. You know what I mean? Like, I was her day-to-day guy. I mean, I'm the one that checked her into the hospital. I'm the one that checked her out of the hospital. There's in the National Enquirer on 9/11 when they were checking her out of the hospital, when we were checking her out of the hospital, there's a picture of her getting in my truck. She went to my grandma's house in Santa Barbara on 9/11.
What was she in the hospital for?
That's her. I'm not going to get into that.
Okay. So they checked.
That's a HIPAA violation, because I literally was the contact for the doctor.
Okay. So you were there for her, and helping her out and everything. Now, what made you think that Jay-Z and Mariah would work?
Well, DJ Clue produced the record. DJ Clue was signed to Rockefeller. Jay-Z had Hard Knock Life and Can I Get A, and Money Ain't a Thing. So I'm like, you want to get out of the hood and start making pop records and get up the Billboard chart, because he had not had a #1 yet. Those records didn't hit #1. So I was like, this will look good for you for credibility, for street credibility. You're coming off of Sony. You need a young, hot rapper on your shit to cross this over. DJ Clue produced the record, who was signed to Rockefeller. So I'm like, this will work. And I went to Jay. He said no. I went to Mariah. She said no. And she said no, he's too street. He said she's too pop. So I said, look, I'm coming to New York. Jay, let's have dinner at Mr. Chow's at 7. And I called her and said, Mariah, let's have dinner at Mr. Chow's at 7:30. So when they showed up, sat down with Jay. What are you up to, Miz? What are you up to? Funkmaster Flex, everybody's sitting there. Had this big old dinner. Mariah shows up. I said, here, sit right here next to Jay-Z. And Clue was there. And I said, Clue, wouldn't it be great if the record that you produced, which is the first single for her, had him on it? Dame, doesn't that work out good numbers-wise for you guys to set up your next project? Do you want to get into the Philippines? Jay was like, yeah, cool. Mariah, you want to get into Marcy Projects? Yeah, cool. Then what are we fighting about? Let's get this done. We're in the studio the next night. And that was also the time where, like, for instance, we had Brett Ratner, Jerry O'Connell, all these people producing the video, and Jay was giving me shit about showing up to the video. I'm like, here's your first #1 record, and you're playing games with the video. You know what I mean? Like, but I called Dame, and Dame made it happen. You know what I mean? Like, but that's the kind of shit I was dealing with Jay. You know what I mean? God bless him. I mean, he's a star, but fuck. Do you know what I mean? And it was funny when he had the Pharrell record, Just Wanna Love You. And I was like, and that's another record I played, another record I broke, doing it. And I get called to his video shoot for that record. And Jay starts like, I'm the Sammy Davis Jr. of hip hop, da-da-da-da-da. You should just play my records, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, what are we talking about? I'm playing this record. It was, well, you should just know I'm Jay-Z, play my records. I was like, this, and I left.
Damn.
And that's
okay.
just the way he was. You know what I mean? And to this day, he's the same way. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, look, it's one thing, well, you know, artists are artists. I'll just leave it alone.
Why? So why do you think Dame gets the rap of being the hard one to work with?
Who does that benefit?
Well, I mean, it benefits Jay-Z.
Okay. And what's that machine?
Oh. I mean, you know, it's not all. We see the videos of Dame yelling at people, and you know, we hear stories. Irv Gotti had a story about him not being able to work with Dame, so it's not all just, you know.
Dame does have his moments, but he's also a genius. But a lot of people, you know, Dame. Look, I have a different experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I don't go with the bullshit. And
yeah, you're not. You don't seem like you're scared if Dame Dash starts yelling.
No, I just look at him and say, "Calm the down."
A lot of people probably are probably pretty intimidated if Dame. So I can see, like, if Dame starts yelling at somebody.
I got Tommy Mottola talking about shooting me over his ex-wife. You know what I'm saying? Trying to kidnap me and take me to studios to play his records. You know, I got Bloods and Crips in Los Angeles and essays putting pressure on me to play records. And if I don't fold for any of these guys, how the am I going to fold for you? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it would put me in a bad position if any of these, you know what I mean? So I had to stand my ground at every situation. You know, the first sign of weakness that you give, there's your chum in the water. You getting eaten up. I just could not do that. You know, you take a bribe, that's a weakness. You get checked, that's a weakness. So I always came with the truth. I always came with the facts, and I always talked to you straight and treated you with respect. And we had a great relationship with everybody. I never had a problem with anybody.
Now, how did you and Mariah end things? Like what?
I bolted. I mean, I look, for a long time, I knew what was going on and I wanted to leave. But I have this thing about duty. Do you know what I'm saying? Not quitting till the job's done. So when I brought in Benny Medina to manage her, sent her to Atlanta to make some records, come back with an Usher record, which I know we could play, Jermaine, that formula, set up what I needed to set up in the prep for radio, and then I slipped out the back door.
Okay. I seen you guys had an incident or something?
Yeah, a couple incidents.
It was kind of part of it too?
Well, I mean, not to get into that, but at the hospital was the start of it. You know what I mean? It was a physical altercation where she just, you know, she was having a bad situation. You know what I mean? And it was what it was. But there was still up and downs to it. You know what I mean? Like with any relationship, with any friend, you make up, break up, make up, break up, make up, break up. And as I was trying to decide or trying to get out of it, you know, with each of these instances happening and kept getting put in these positions, I finally just said, this, I'm good. And hooked it up and left. And that was that.
Okay, so at the same time you left working with Mariah, is this when you went back to Santa Barbara?
Yeah, I left everything at the same time.
Okay.
You know, my grandma got sick or she fell down over the holidays of 2005. And it just rocked my world. And I started to realize how all of this was not important. You know, people were using me. I mean, look at the Jay-Z situation. You know, you did all of this for all of these people, made all of these people a lot of money, and they're always an asshole. Or always putting you in the middle of their shit, or always asking you for more, and never saying, hey, thank you. Hey, you did this. You know, like, for instance, Snoop Dogg always gave me credit. You know, the very first thing he said is, I never would have been thinking of working with Dre again if it wasn't for you. You know, when I did Cruisin', he was the first one on Dub CNN. Love what Damizza's doing with Butch Cassidy. Ja Rule, Irv Gotti, every interview, whether it's Drink Champs or Power or any other radio station they do, they give love. But a lot of people didn't do that. So I just got to a point where I was like, not bitter, but just kind of like, you know, I started this shit. This is thanks I get. You know, my grandma just fell down. I'm gonna go deal with that. I'm gonna go deal with my family shit for all this. And then I start meeting, you know, the young people in the neighborhood. You know, started meeting Bams and Skippy and Wino, rest in peace, and Rocks, and shout out Lil Rocks. Shout out, you know, and so I just start mentoring. You know, I met Jim Brown, Hall of Fame football player, rest in peace, and started working in gang intervention and started marrying a lot of that together. Started working with Day One and the New West and met everybody from K-Dot, Kendrick to Tajay and Noni Spitz and Bishop Lamont. Just said, look, this is more gratifying for me to be underground and give people advice and mentor people and help people that appreciate it than these people that are already blowed up. And you know what I mean?
How did you meet Tupac?
The year that Tupac did the Grammys with Kiss, afterwards they came to an event at the Four Seasons in Hollywood. And when they walked in, me and a friend of mine were the only two people that would walk up to Death Row and say hello. You know, and we saw Suge, we saw Pac, and we just walked up and was like, oh shit, Pac. And I walked up to him and I said, yo, I love the new album. And he stopped for a second and he hit Suge and he goes, Suge, so White Boy says he got the album. And I was like, whoops. And he goes, how'd you get the album? And I said, well, I work at the alternative station. They know I can't play it, so they give it to us on the Friday before the Tuesday it comes out. And that was that. And he said, what's your favorite song? And I said, song 1, disc 2, a million pairs of eyes looking hard but won't realize. And then he finished the sentence with me. You never see the P. And he shook my hand. And he's like, oh, meet this person, meet that person. And that was that.
50 Cent.
What about him?
How did you were instrumental in connecting some dots there?
Well, no, I mean, 50 had a song called How to Rob, and he had a song called Wankster, right? And at the time, there were a lot of rappers out that felt that they were next. Do you know what I mean? Like, they didn't want to get in the middle of that. He was so hot in the street that everybody was like, is he signed to Sony? Is he doing it? Where's he signed? What's he doing? Who's he going to diss next? And Eminem, in his joking, crazy way, is, I need to find 50 Cent before he disses me. Do you know him? You know what I mean? I was like, no, I don't know him. And he goes, well, I need to go on the radio and do a Kmart Shoppers. And I'm like, Kmart Shoppers? What the f is that? And he goes, well, I go on the radio and say, attention, Kmart Shoppers. And I said, you want to find 50 Cent on the radio? He said, yeah. So we transferred him to Big Boy or the Baker Boys, and he went on the radio and he said, I'm looking for 50 Cent. The next thing you know, 50 called the label, shot out to LA, and he was signed.
Now, Shade Shiest. Now, this was kind of a big deal for you. You worked with Shade Shiest.
It's another day.
You guys had a hit.
Yeah, we had Where I Want to Be. Where
Huge.
I Want to Be with Nate Dogg, #1 rap single. It was great. But what people don't realize about Shade was signed to the radio station. So it was part of my job to produce Shade.
Okay, right, because I think you mentioned that they wanted to start a record label because record labels were the thing to start at the time.
Well, you know, we had just had the success with Aftermath. We had just had the success with Murder Inc. We had just had the success with all of these labels helping them. And they were like, look, the real money is in the label side. So go get us a joint venture. So people think that 50 Cent was the first artist to get $1 million. First rapper to get $1 million. Shade was. And that check went straight to MS Broadcasting.
Damn.
MCA gave us we got it twice. When it was all said and done, we got like $2.5 million in advances for MS Broadcasting. Damn. And then because it was #1, because of all of this, and then because I was helping other artists, the jealousy thing kicked in. So, you know, helping Mariah, all of a sudden, I look at the front page of the LA Times and there's this thing that says airplay raises disclosure issue. Damizza is worse than Radio Disney. He's getting money everywhere. #4 in the source and playing Mariah Carey records and using his leverage. I mean, they called it out. Like Mariah Carey's using Damien's leverage to keep her relevant, basically. you know, and all of this kind of shit. He must be getting paid from her, you know, all of this kind of shit, doing remixes and all this. But what people didn't realize is I'm not an idiot. So I went to FCC attorneys, I went to the lawyers, and they said, if you're gonna produce records, then one, you can't be the final say, and two, sign it to the radio station. So when I produced Lights Out for West Side Connection, it was signed to MS Broadcasting. When I did the main racing scene for the Fast and the Furious 1, Life Ain't a Game, you know, I produced that with Ja Rule. Signed MS Broadcasting. They had to license it from MS Broadcasting. So all of that money went to MS Broadcasting. Now when it hit the front page of the paper, they said, oh, this is all Damien. And I was like, oh, you sons of bitches. You know, and that's what, you know, that's part of the frustration, is it was like, yo, I keep doing all of this shit for everybody, and everybody keeps throwing me under the bus. You know, so I was just like, this, I'm going home.
So you were accused of payola?
Of course I was. But they couldn't prove anything, and I didn't do it. I had a federal, when they investigated Murder Inc., for instance, and they were looking for whatever they were looking for with Murder Inc., it wasn't just Murder Inc. they investigated. Do you know what I mean? Like, they were trying to find that connection too. You know what I mean? So
let me ask you, man. So when artists do concerts for the radio station,
yeah,
they do them for free.
They sometimes.
Sometimes.
Well, it depends. Like, for instance, when I was working at Power, I broke all of these artists. For instance, nobody was with Dre or looking for Dre like that. No one was with Snoop or looking for Snoop like that. Eminem didn't exist. Jay-Z didn't exist. I believed in them and put them on the radio. So when I believed in them, put them on the radio, and I said I was having a party every year, everybody would just say, I'm coming to the party. So it was never about money. It was never about any of it. It was like, yo, we're having a big concert every year. Everybody wanted to play it. Do you know what I'm saying? Everybody wanted to do the show.
Well, okay, yeah.
But these days,
all over the country, people will do free shows. You know what I'm saying?
But, okay, so look at it like this.
Shows.
Okay, let's look at
Artists
the Up in Smoke tour.
Shows.
Let's look at the Up in Smoke tour, since we're talking about a national tour.
Okay.
What we did in Hawaii became the Up in Smoke tour. Hot 97's touring apparatus for Summer Jam was the staging that we used for Hawaii. That became mobile. When he wanted to go on tour, no venue would take Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. So then I called Jay Brown, whose wife works for Magic Johnson, and said, why don't we have Magic Johnson be the promoter for the Up in Smoke tour? That way we can get into all the venues. So we were embedded with the artists because we were behind the deals that put them on the road. So we were making them millions of dollars. So if I said, look,
if you're the one doing it, and you don't own the radio station, why would they feel indebted to do it for you, and you're not even going to be the one?
Not me. They never did it for me. I never asked for a personal favor. They always did it for the station.
Right. Exactly. But the radio station is the one that did the work. You did the work. And the radio station is the one benefiting the money, not you.
Now, do you see my frustration?
Yeah. Well,
because if I asked for a favor, they'd go, F you. But if I said, hey, do this for the radio station, they'd be like, oh, well, yeah.
Now, I would feel like if you got someone like Snoop or these big guys and they do these free shows, I would think they would expect their record to be spun.
Well, they were already getting spun.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it would always be so far after the fact. I would never play an artist. I never would play an artist that wasn't right for my radio station. I would never book an artist on Powerhouse that I wasn't playing. Do you know what I'm saying? It's core brand marketing. It's synergy marketing. Consistency and repetition breeds familiarity. Familiarity.
Why would they do these shows for free?
Because we are breaking the record.
They just like you? I'm just curious. I'm just as a fan.
No, I'm just telling you. I mean,
I know they do a lot of free shows, so I'm just, I'm kind of trying to dig here.
I think things have changed. The reason why they did the shows is because we were involved in every facet of their career. It was more than just playing their records. Like I said with the Dr. Dre situation, we were involved in every step of the way. I mean, when he went to Master 2001, the very last phase of the 2001 project. It's me, Dre, and the mastering guy. Do you know what I mean? Like the rollout. I mean, I was on the hook for his promo budget. Do you know what I mean? So I was involved in every step of the way in a lot of these artists' careers. So if I said we're doing a Powerhouse concert, they would just show up, perform or not. Do you know what I'm saying? So it was a different culture for Power 106 because we were creating the platform that was breaking all of these artists. So it didn't matter whether it was Monica, who we didn't play at the time, or C Murder, who we didn't play at the time, they would show up to the back gate and ask for Damien. Suge, come to the show. Ask for Damien. You know what I mean? Like, it just was what it was. You know what I mean? Now, years later, with iHeart and these conglomerates and all of this, it's all a leverage play. Nobody's doing anything for the passion of the music. I was doing it for the passion of the music. We were doing it as a team. Big Boy, Fuzzy, Mr. Chalk, C-, Baker Boys. We were all doing it as fans of something that wasn't number one in the world, more or less number one in LA yet. In the biggest pop craze that we have ever had, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys. I'm sitting there playing Still DRE, Deep Cover, Ain't No Fun, Kill You, The Way I Am, totally against the grain. And it was number one. So how could you not with us? How could you not want to be a part of anything we were doing?
I hear you. Yeah.
And we had every artist. I mean,
were you at least making good money at the radio station?
No, that's the worst part of it. Because I was producing all the records, all the money went to Emmis. I was getting the basic low six figure.
Low six figure?
Like, I think at my peak, I made 200, 225.
Okay.
For running the record label and making $2.5 million for them with no bonus. Then, I mean, I was doing, like, for instance, think the Puffy in Paradise promotion alone did $30 million in non-spot revenue, which means they didn't have to play a commercial for it. This is people just giving them money so that the DJs would say, brought to you by Toyota. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Jeez.
So.
No bonuses.
No bonuses.
That's horrible.
And not even a thank you in the album credits.
Did you get your did you get your publishing? Are you still making money off of these records?
No, I didn't write where I want to be. Shade wrote where I want to be. KG
wrote
produced
though. I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, I get
for.
After the fact when the deal was dissolved. Like for instance, Lights Out still hasn't recouped. Where I Want to Be still hasn't recouped. They spent so much money on these records that they never recouped.
Where I Want to Be never recouped?
No, I mean, they spent $1 million on it, and Where I Want to Be went number one as a single.
Oh, okay.
They spent $250,000 on Shade's first video with Timbaland. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you think that recouped? There's still $750,000 recoup on Shade's album. Just so you know. Do you know what I mean? So no. But I do get some publishing. I mean, but a lot of the records we sampled back in the day, like for instance, Crybaby with Snoop Dogg and Mariah, I never got any publishing on that. You know, I think I made $600 total in royalties last quarter.
You've produced songs for Mariah too, right?
Yeah, produced. You know, the only song that that pays the best is Nate Dogg, Music in Me.
Okay.
That's the one that pays the best. I get like $1,000 twice a year. $2,000 a year.
Eesh. Okay.
Now here's something crazy. There was a song that we did during those sessions that never came out, and an a cappella leaked. Now, not until this year, I made like 15 grand in royalties on it because some dance guy in Europe decided to remix it and use the vocals for it and made a new song out of it. It went to like number 20 on the UK chart.
Really?
For a song that never came out 25 years later.
And you're getting paid for it.
And now that's the most that I've ever gotten paid for any record of my career.
Wow. Sheesh.
But I mean, I was always working for someone else. I never did it for the money. I never wanted, I mean, when I did I Still Believe for Mariah, which was the first record that I ever produced, I didn't even ask to get paid. I didn't want to get paid because I felt it would be a conflict of interest with the radio station. I said, look, I'll just do it and just give it to you, but I can't make money from this because it's my job to play the records. You know what I mean? So I was always real, you know, I'm a Puritan like that. You know what I mean? Like, if I give you my word, I follow through. If I have a deal with you, I do my part. You know what I mean? And I don't f around. You know, I've had this long a career, and I've had this, no one can ever say that I screwed someone over intentionally, to this day. Nobody can say that I did something for money to this day. Not one of those artists that I ever worked with can ever say that I'm lying.
So why not take payola? Because I do know that people take payola, and it's a pretty common thing in the music business. Like,
if
you know,
take it,
you'll have a guy who really can't produce for shit, and he'll sell somebody some records. You know what I'm saying? And then that's really, he's not really selling the beats. It's just the payola.
Because if you do it once, you're everybody's bitch. It means you have a price. You'll play the shitty shit and your ratings will go down. The reason why Power was #1 is we always had the dopest shit. You couldn't buy us. You couldn't leverage us. You couldn't intimidate us. We did things that were right for the audience of Los Angeles. That's it. We did the shows that were right for the city of Los Angeles. That's why we were #1 in the biggest pop craze in the world.
Okay.
And never had a problem at any of our shows. No stabbings, no fights, no nothing. Everybody treated Power with respect.
DJs only make $50 an hour.
Yeah.
Why would a DJ want to work I mean, I get it. You're on the radio and it's a clout thing.
I get it.
If you're only working 2 hours a week, you know, or 1 hour a day for 5 days, that's not a lot of money. How are they? You know what I'm saying?
Today with the politics and all that shit, I can't blame them. But it's just not my bag.
I was also told, you know, I don't know if this is true or not, but, you know, a DJ would have like 10 minutes to spin whatever they wanted to spin, and that would be their way of making some extra money. Like, Akon would come and be like, yo, let me buy, you know, 3 minutes from you of your 10 minutes, and let me make a little bit of money.
Well, that's between them and God. I ain't got nothing to do with that.
I'm just curious.
No, I mean, I got offered cars, I got offered TVs, I got offered bags, I got offered guns, I got offered... But
Somebody offered you, so you got offered all that.
Oh, hell yeah. Over the years, so when it comes to payola, yes, I was offered everything, but it was always as a joke because they knew I wouldn't take it. I got offered yachts, cars, you know what I mean? But it was always a joke. You're not gonna buy me a yacht. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was always a joke because it just wasn't something everybody knew from day one. Since I was 12 years old growing up in this business, I don't f around. It's just not my thing. I do my job, I go home. I don't go to the parties, I don't hang out, I don't... Call Damizza when you want something serious done. You want real advice. You know what I mean? Like, you guys want to play games and do this shitty record, payola shit? Well, call someone else. And if I heard somebody did that, I'm not going to knock on their door and go, hey, man, what are you doing? You know, whatever, unless I really care about that person. And then I'll be like, here's what I heard. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you doing something up? Like, keep in mind, it affects your ratings. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, if you're not playing what's right for the audience and you're not doing it for the audience, you know, it's like this. A lot of DJs get on the radio so they can go DJ in Hollywood when they need to be DJing in Reseda. They need to be Rialto. They need to be East Los. They need to be, you know what I mean, where their core market is, where they can break their brand. But they want to go to Hollywood like they already made it. Well, then you already made it. So if you start at Hollywood, you're not going to have any success because you're not going to grow your brand. So if you just take some money and go do the short hustle, that's when you get hit by the popo. Do you know what I'm saying? The short money is never long money, bruh.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I guess
man.
in my case, it ain't long money either. So it.
Yeah, I mean, you ended
Maybe
up,
this will do $1 million and I'll get a record deal out of it.
maybe.
You got the subscribers? What?
Well, hopefully, man. Hopefully.
And
man.
congratulations, man. I be watching your stuff and it's dope.
Thank you, man.
What's homie's
Thank you.
name again? What the
607 Unc.
607 Unc? I swear to God, if I was in radio, he would be a jock. Like, he is dope. I love the character and the. I mean, I went down a rabbit hole one weekend and just watched every fucking clip that this guy did. Like, that's the talent that I would hire on radio. Like, stuff like that cuts through. You know what I mean? It's dope. I love what you're doing. That's the first place I saw it was on your thing. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I started looking through all of it.
Yeah, he's hilarious, man.
And it just, I mean, it just the way, you can tell he's smart. He'll have a lot of longevity.
Yeah. He's funny, man. He's gonna be around, man, for sure. Shout out
Good
607 Unc, man.
But congratulations,
He just
you're
did an
doing a good
interview
job.
earlier today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wish I was here. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, like, you know, for a while there, I was going to do another radio station. And at the time, Michael Blackson was coming up. And I was like, that's a morning show. So I hired him and moved him to Los Angeles from Atlanta. And was training him to do morning radio. But we just didn't end up doing it. The venture fell through, so. But I hired him and moved him. I mean, I was like, this guy is a morning show host.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Like, that's something I really wanted to do. I mean, I had hired Son Doobie to do nights on Power 106 when, I mean, that
We gotta get you back in
play a
radio,
poppy.
man.
Let's see what happens.
'Cause your passion is too much. It's undeniable, man. You know what
Appreciate
I'm saying?
it.
Like, you don't find people that love it like you love it, man. So they need people like you
Thank you.
in there to push
Thank you.
the radio, but not just the radio, the music in the right direction, man. For the love, not just all about the money.
Well, if they ever get it together, I'd be more than happy to fix it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you know, I think what people are going to start realizing, you know, I saw a clip with Rodney Jerkins today talking about radio. Artists make more at radio than they do on streaming. I think people are starting to realize that the whole streaming thing is some bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, you have to remember, only 26% of Americans in low-income areas and rural areas have data plans on their cell phone. They don't have smartphones. When you're out in the middle of Podunk, Tennessee, you don't get internet. You know, when I was living in Louisiana in the country, taking care of my grandma for those 5-6 years, I didn't have cell service at the house. All I got was radio.
What's up? This is Cam Capone. We got more content like this coming soon. So hit that like button, subscribe, and stay locked in to Cam Capone News.